This is Tall Tale TV, your podcast for sci-fi and fantasy short stories. Of Bandits and Bad Magic by Lesley Herron. Chapter 15, Skeenness. With expectations running high, the parcel arch turned out to be a bit of a letdown. Eric didn't know exactly what he was hoping to see, but a large stone arch stretching across the street certainly wasn't it. The peak of the structure only reached 16 feet off the ground and created a small tunnel leading into another sector of Still Harbor. It would appear to have earned its fitting moniker by the hundreds of flyers, public notices, advertisements, and posters that have been plastered across every available inch. Yellowed from age, they gave the parcel arch the look of a wrapped package ready to be mailed. With a rather annoyed sigh, Eric tugged down a poster. Well, this isn't good. He had to admit the image of him was in a fair likeness, if a bit crude. The artist had even managed a decent approximation of his beloved Hawaiian shirt. Atlas leaned over, scrutinizing another poster, which was the second in a series of 3. He let out a grunt of indignation. Ugh, they never get my nose right. Evan reached up and snatched the paper out of the doctor's hand. He skimmed past the artist's rendering and settled on the large printed text. Wanted for treason and kidnapping? He looked back up at the others. Who did we kidnap? Atlas pulled his gaze away from his own wanted poster and pulled a face. Oh, just the crown prince. No big deal. Evan folded the yellowed parchment and tucked it into his bag with a loud sigh. Just once, I want an adventure where you two don't screw things up all the time. He would have suggested that they simply remove the posters and went about their day, but the parcel arch was covered with copy after copy of his traveling companions. Goofy renditions of Eric, Atlas, and even the half-rotted face of Bob were staring down at them. Even Barry had been scribbled in, as an afterthought, on a few of the Arcanist's posters. But there was no sign of himself among the wanted papers. Everyone always forgot the little guy. Is that Atlas? The group froze collectively as a loud, heavy voice broke over the bustling noise of the gathered crowds. Eric chanced a glance over his shoulder, expecting to see a group of soldiers ready to clap them in irons. Instead, he saw a rough-and-tumble-looking group congregating on the opposite side of the arch, staring not at them, but at the posters. The leader, a man sporting some ogre lineage, easily towered above the rest of the crowd as he leaned in to get a better look with his cohorts. A tall, bird-faced man jabbed at the poster with a clawed finger. It can't be. The nose is all wrong. No, I think it is. The large man ripped the poster off the wall and spun around, holding it up to the light. This sorry sword still owes me 300 gold. A small, square-jawed female grinned with a small shrug. Oh, he's not so bad. He slept with your wife. The woman chuckled. Better him than me. Atlas tugged on the hem of the king's cloak. Come on, let's go. He had to lean in to be heard over the raucous laughter of the band of bounty hunters. They may look like idiots, which they are, but they're good at what they do. Eric gave the rowdy gang a worrisome final glance before following on the Arcanist's heels. Why were even the simplest of errands never easy? As soon as they were clear of the arch, Atlas pulled them to the side of the road and ducked into a shadowy alcove. He glanced up and down the street before he turned his attention to the tiny merc. You'll have to take Barry. He fished out a coin from the empty depths of his change purse. Get him something to eat and occupy yourselves elsewhere. If he's seen with me, we're as sure as caught. Evan snatched the single gold coin out of the air. Okay, But he kinda sticks out regardless. Wouldn't it be a better idea to just find somewhere to hide? Atlas shrugged. It's a good thing you know where a troupe of traveling performers are staying. Just go loiter around with them, and he'll be just another trained animal. Barry let out an incensed huff, grumbling beneath his breath. Don't give me none of your lip. Just go scare some children or something. We'll find you when we're done here. As an afterthought, he jabbed a thumb at Bob. And take this walking tin can with you. I don't want him drawing any attention to us. The tiny merc offered Atlas a flat look before climbing up on the back of the bear. Fine. Bob, you're with me, but I'm leaving Varen with you guys. The prince shot him a hurt expression, but Evan held up a hand. I need you to watch these two. Knowing them, they're sure to cause trouble, so keep an eye out. Varen straightened up and nodded seriously. And remember what I taught you. Evan nudged Barry, and they began to amble back into the busy street. Don't give him your money. After a bit of encouragement from Eric, Bob joined them, his armor clanking in time with his slow pace. Varen watched the trio disappear into the surging bustle of the main street and felt a tingle of fear tickle his senses. This was the first time anyone had ever left him in charge. Of anything. He looked over at the other two, swallowing hard. All right, I'm in charge. Atlas stepped out into the flow of pedestrians and motioned for them to follow. So keep your heads down and follow me. Varen exhaled in relief and fell in line behind the Arcanist. The Parcel Arch was simply a gateway to the more permanent businesses of Still Harbor. The yellowed parchments gave way to brick-and-mortar establishments that lined the roads. The cobble streets were clean of filth and debris, and the stone buildings glimmered in the afternoon sun. It took Eric a moment to realize, but they were literally glistening. Even the air had an ethereal sparkle to it. Interest piqued, he waved his fingers and watched the shimmering light part like mist. It's just a glamour spell, Atlas explained. Minor illusion magic to class up the place, make it seem more mystical and whatnot. Completely useless, but it impresses the rubes. Eric could tell the Arcanist was being flippant, but he had to admit it had the desired effect. Looking closer, he began to see other signs of casual magic. One shop had a series of glowing runes etched into its wall that were constantly shifting. Another building sported a display of massive gemstones that pulsed with light, casting a rainbow of colors across the interior of the store. Eric stopped in front of a shop that had bizarre plants growing right out of the stonework. It was forced into the narrow gap between two larger buildings, almost an afterthought of a structure. The small window held a display with a multitude of canisters, each containing a different assortment of fungus, dried roots, and even the occasional odd creature suspended in yellow liquid. He felt a rush of excitement as he turned to give the window his full attention. The letters painted on the glass read, Sanctum Crafts Apothecary. He pulled out his notebook and flipped it open to a blank page. He was halfway through his first illustration when he felt Atlas tug at his cloak. What are you doing? We're not here to sightsee. We need to find your tracking mage so we can get out of here. But... Eric paused, looking longingly at the window of goods. There's several species of mushrooms in there that I've never seen before. The gill structure on that one is unprecedented. Atlas rolled his eye and continued down the road. You can buy your psychedelics later. Now focus. We're looking for a shop with a tracker sign. Eric gave the apothecary shop a wistful glance before catching up to the Arcanist. How can you tell what any of these buildings even are? Most don't have signs. That wasn't entirely true. There were plenty of signs, but many lacked words. They were just simple shapes carved into the wood. Atlas shrugged. Most folk aren't literate, so a communication system was developed. That building right there is home for all your levitational needs. He pointed to a sign of a diamond in a circle with a line below it. Sure enough, several large stones were slowly spinning in midair in front of the shop, like lawn decorations. Popular with construction crews, or ships with lots of heavy cargo. He turned and pointed at another sign across the street, emblazoned with a two-pronged fork. That one there is a dowsing mage. If it's buried, they can find it. And this one... He came to a stop beneath a gilded flag displaying an arrow that curled in on itself. This here's our tracking mage. Eric looked from the sign to the building. It was a standard red brick structure with a vaguely map-like mural painted on the door. There were no glittering runes on its walls, and no open display of magic. It was just a plain, conventional building, boring compared to the other shops around it. Atlas reached for the doorknob and looked back at the king and the prince. Listen, let me do the talking. These one-trick ponies are all pomp and flair, shysters to their core. Eric opened his mouth, but the Arcanist held up a hand. Trust me, if they smell even a hint of gullibility, you'll be paying double. Atlas twisted the knob and pushed his way in. As Eric followed the others in, the scent of old parchment, intermingled with incense, wafted over his senses like a long, forgotten memory. He closed his eyes and breathed in deep. It almost felt like the library from home. The walls were even hidden beneath countless rows of towering bookcases, but each shelf was bowed under the weight of thousands of scrolls and dusty tomes. A multitude of tables, in all sizes and shapes, were crammed into the small space with zeal, and each one heaped with globes, compasses, and crystal pendulums. Star charts plastered what bare walls could be seen, and from the ceiling hung model planets and heavenly bodies. The floor was covered in giant, hand-spun rugs, and half a dozen plush armchairs were forced into any remaining space. A large table sat sentry at the very heart of the room, carved from a single slab of wood into a relief map of the entire continent. Eric was ready to give up the search for his brother and suggest they just spend their days in here, perusing the stacks and reading up on all the foreign knowledge, when a commotion of chaos pulled him back into the moment. Plucking books off the shelves at random, Atlas flipped through the pages before tossing them to the floor. Fake, real but written by an idiot. Oh look, this one doesn't even have any writing in it. Concerned for the growing pile of rejected books, Eric turned to chastise the Arcanist, but was caught off guard by a voice from the depths of a large, cushioned armchair. Perhaps you simply cannot read what it has to tell you. Half hidden in shadow, they turned to see an old man sitting opposite them at the large carved table. He was running his hand over the incense burner to waft smoke around his face. He looked up at them with black eyes, magnified by tiny spectacles. His features were hidden beneath locks of wispy white hair that stretched out from under a comically small hat. In essence, he looked every bit the part of a wise wizard. The old man stood, gesturing to 3 empty chairs with a wave of his thin fingers. The spirits tell me that you have come to me because... He paused to breathe in the incense smoke. One of you has lost someone. Ignoring his chair, Atlas folded his arms across his chest and scoffed. Oh, great deduction. No idea how you managed that conclusion, being a tracking mage and all. The old man continued on as if he hadn't heard the insult and smiled at the others. I am a seeker for those in search of something or someone lost. He shifted slightly in his chair. For a small fee, I can find that which you seek anywhere in the world. Whom among you requires my service?" Atlas scoffed. "You mean the spirits didn't tell you?" Eric shot him a warning look before turning in his chair to better face the man. "I need to find my brother." The old man nodded slowly, then clapped his hands. "Timothy, bring me the candles of lost souls." A beaded curtain near the back of the shop parted, and a small squirrel of a man approached, carrying an armful of massive wax candles. The old man took them, one at a time, arranging them around a smoky crystal ball sat on a fabric pentagram. "For this spell to work, I need you to picture your sibling in your mind. See their face. Hear their voice. Imagine their surroundings. Can you do this?" Eric nodded, closing his eyes. "I'll try." "Good." The old man began chanting, slowly lighting the first candle with a lit taper. "With the first flame, the way is lit." He repeated the mantra, slowly lighting another candle. "With the second, the connection to the spirit world opens." Atlas rolled his eye. At this rate, the brother would probably be dead from old age before they found out where he was. He snapped his fingers as the old man moved to the next point in the pentagram. All 5 candles erupted into jets of flame 3 feet high. Molten wax exploded outward, splattering the old man, the crystal ball, and several bookshelves. As the flames died down, only stubs of the candles remained. The old man's mouth worked open and closed for a moment before he gave a weak chuckle. "It would seem the spirits are eager today." He shot the Arcanist a dirty look, which the assistant mirrored before retreating to get a rag to clean up the mess. Atlas just grinned. "And, what does your fancy marble there say?" The wizard seemed to regain his composure and leaned in, slipping back into his act. He stared at the swirling mist within the orb. "Oh, I'm afraid something is clouding us from seeing your sibling. The way is unclear." Eric felt his hopes sink. "Can you tell me anything? Is he okay at least?" Atlas raised a finger. "Wait for it." The old man grinned broadly. "You're in luck, for I have recently come into possession of a tome of intense power that should allow us to pierce this veil. For an additional fee, of course." Atlas ticked an imaginary box. "And there it is." Eric shifted to give a slow, burning gaze up at the Arcanist. "Could you not?" The beaded curtain parted once more, and the assistant hurried in, nearly collapsing under the weight of a monstrous book. It was leather-bound, with massive iron buckles holding it shut. Across the front was a carefully painted title in a foreign language. "Ah, Timothy, you've brought the tome. Good, good." With a sweep of his arm, he pushed the remnants of the candles off the table before sliding the crystal ball to the side. He stopped to peel a large spot of wax from its surface and then gestured to the vacant spot before him. "Place the grimoire before me. Then clean up this mess, will you?" The mousy man looked put out, but slammed the book down and retreated, once again, to gather a broom and dustpan. "As you can see, magic is a fickle mistress. She is keen and unknowable." The shop owner reached down into a pouch at his side and pulled out a handful of dust. He opened the lid to his incense burner and sprinkled it in. The smoke changed from a dull gray to a glowing lavender. We will have to ask her for her guidance in locating that which you have lost." Atlas pushed his forehead into his fingers, massaging the growing irritation. He sighed heavily and with his free hand drew a rune in the air. "Enough with the theatrics! We know!" He sucked in a deep breath and blew through the center of the sigil, causing an eruption of wind to swirl around them. The book sprang open, pages whipping back and forth until it snapped to a halt midway through. The tables and chairs vibrated as the text on the page glowed a luminous purple. Atlas wiggled his fingers in a mockery of mysticism. "Behold, the power of the book!" Scrolls shot out of their cases. Books ejected themselves across the room. Star charts were ripped from the walls, and the mobile of the cosmos above them began to spin. The old man cried out in fear, throwing his arms around his head for protection. The beaded curtain was nearly ripped from the wall as Timothy ran in to observe the chaos, his arms laden with cleaning supplies. With a clap of his hands, Atlas brought it all to a stop. The blazing fires and the candles died out, and the wind faded like a gentle breeze, dropping the whirlwind of papers and maps to the floor. He pulled a sneering face as he leaned against the table. "Now, let me guess. The veil is still too thick to see through, right?" He straightened his back, pushing his hands against his hips. "Cut the crap, and let's get to some actual tracking magic." Eric hid his face behind his hands for a long moment, fighting off the urge to scream. As he dragged his hands away, he could see Timothy drop his armful of supplies, clench his jaw in their direction, and stomp from the room. "What are you doing?" He tugged the Arcanist down into the vacant third chair. "Great! Now you've gone and lost me my help!" The shop owner dropped his mystical voice and shifted demeanor completely. "Was all that necessary? I mean, really, I'm just trying to make an honest living here." Wig, beard, and false nose all came off in a flurry to reveal a middle-aged man with sallow skin. He slammed his hands down on the table and leaned over to glower at them. "And you've wrecked me shop." Atlas couldn't fight the grin any farther. He chuckled a little as he leaned back in his chair. "What can I say? I can't stand people who showboat." He waved a hand, gesturing aimlessly in front of him. "Now, how's about you perform a real tracking spell, and we'll leave you be." Clearly annoyed, the shop owner grumbled as he produced a small silver bowl with runes engraved all along the rim, slamming it on the table. "Fine. You, give me your hand." Eric sat up straight and reached forward. Okay. Do I need to picture him in my mind again?" "Nah, course not." The shop owner unsheathed a pointed dagger, and with surprising speed and efficiency, ran the blade across the man's open palm. "Ah, what the hell?" Eric made to recoil, but the shop owner, no longer old and feeble, had a firm grasp on his hand. He was yanked forward and watched his blood drain into the silver basin, filling the etched runes inside. The shop owner picked up the bowl and swirled the red liquid around, ensuring that all the runes had been coated. As they began to glow, he leaned over the carved table and began mumbling to himself. He poured the blood out across the topographical surface and then uttered a phrase under his breath. Released from the owner's grip, Eric pulled away to look down at the gash in his hand. It was sure to be infected by this less-than-hygienic process. But the fizzling sound of his own blood on the map drew his attention away from the painful wound. He watched as it began to bubble. It roiled and sloshed, looking more like a mound of sentient gelatin as it moved across the continents on the map. It hovered in the most northern area before it fizzled out and evaporated, leaving only a slight singe mark on the wood. "Huh, odd." The shop owner tilted his head, waiting for the blood to reappear. But nothing happened. He clicked his tongue against his teeth and looked up at the others. "Well, he's not here. Now pay me and get out." Eric clenched his bleeding hand. "Wait, what? What do you mean he's not here? Is he dead?" The shop owner scoffed. "No, you numpty. He's alive. Otherwise the spell wouldn't have worked. He's just not on this world, and I can only track him on my current plane of existence. Now, that'll be 20 gold pieces." Atlas stepped forward. "No, we're not paying your tourist fees. It's for all the damages to my shop that you caused." He gestured with his open hand. 30 gold pieces now. Or do we need to involve the gods?" Atlas glowered at the man, unwilling to give him the satisfaction. "Fine." He clapped his hand on the king's shoulder, but kept his focus on the shop owner. "Pay him." Eric blinked several times, shaking himself out of his flabbergasted state. "What do you mean, pay him?" Atlas pulled his gaze away at last, looking down at the king. "It was your spell, so it should be your money. And I've told you before, I'm not from here. I don't have any money," Eric hissed through grit teeth as he stood. Wanting to avoid farther conflict, Varen grabbed the coins from his money bag and dropped them into the proprietor's palm with an apologetic grin. He wanted to follow the rules taught to him by his tiny mentor, but he was also told to keep these two out of trouble. And avoiding an altercation with the local guards was money well spent. The shop owner poked around the handful of coins, counting them silently before snapping his fingers around them. "Thank you." He tucked them into a pouch at his side and leveled a hateful glare on them. "Now get out!" Eric shielded his eyes as they hurried from the shop, eager to comply. The glittering daylight was intense compared to the dim interior they had just left, and the glamour spell wasn't helping. He waited for the door to snap shut before he pushed the Arcanist against the building. "What the hell was all that?" "Listen, I know you're upset you didn't find your brother." Atlas squirmed away from the king with a smile. "But I was just showboating? Educating the man on proper magical spells. He was all snake oil. Probably sold his own grandmother on that rubbish he's peddling in." Atlas paused to readjust his robes. "And I don't showboat." Eric sighed, his short burst of anger spent. He pushed his fingers against the gap between his eyes before returning his attention to the Arcanist. "Sorry, I'm just worried about Vel. So now what? Is there a portal mage or something?" Atlas raised a finger, but was cut short as Varen stepped between them, gesturing urgently at something in the crowd. Eric looked over and saw the very same group of bounty hunters from earlier staring in their direction. At the head of the group was the squirrely little man, Timothy, pointing at them with a sneer on his face. "Damn it." Of Bandits and Bad Magic is Book 3 of the ongoing series by Lesley Herron. Tune in every few weeks to hear the latest chapter as it's being written. If you'd like to listen to Books 1 and 2, you can find links in the description. Welcome, welcome to Crazy Charlie's Rags to Robes clothing boutique. If we don't have it, you probably didn't want it anyway. How may I be of service? Rags to Robes? What? Your sign out front says you're a tracking mage. That's right. Here at Crazy Charlie's, we service all your clothing-based tracking needs. Clothing-based tracking? Indeed. So, what? Like lost hats? Ooh, hats are difficult. You might have to find a specialist for that. A hat-tracking specialist? I could recommend someone if you like. So, then what? Scarves? Sadly, no. Coats? Ooh, not at the moment. What do you track then?
The majority of our business is finding missing socks.
You know, I can't tell if you're legitimately crazy or if that is somehow genius.
Oh no, sir. I assure you I am quite mad.
Oh, well, that clears that up then.